Today, we're talking about practice.
We talking about practice.
We're talking about practice, man.
We're talking about practice, man.
We're talking about how much should you practice playing the guitar. This is important and not really an easy question to answer, because the answer isn't the same for everybody. And the connotation of practice can be very different in different musical circles. For instance, when I was fresh out of high school and playing in heavy metal bands, nobody ever talked about practice, or really even admitted that they did it. I mean, you wanted to be good at your instrument, but under the assumption that you just kind of rolled out of bed and sounded that way, not because you'd actually practiced. When I got into the classical guitar scene, I was initially shocked to hear people brag about how much they practiced. No amount of hours was too much, the more the better. All this to say, deciding exactly where you fit in the wide practice spectrum can be difficult and confusing. At least it was for me. Although everybody will have to decide for themselves how much they should practice, if you're not sure about it, think of it under the umbrella of this philosophy. You should practice the amount that makes you happy. And not just happy, but the most happy. Happy may not be the perfect operative word here. Maybe it's fulfilled, or satisfied, or complete. Something like that. But if we can strike this very delicate balance, it enables us to get the absolute most out of our practice and prevents us from feeling unaccomplished when comparing our own practice schedules to the practice schedules of others. Like you might say, well, they practice more than I do, so that's why they play better than me. Or they practice less than me and sound way better than I do, so what am I doing wrong? Or even, I've got to practice as much as so-and-so in order to sound like them. It's likely that none of these perceptions contain much truth. So let's look at some examples. The great classical guitarist Andres Segovia practiced 5 hours every day, which is a very common standard for aspiring classical guitarists. Steve Vai, a great electric guitarist, said he practiced 10 or more hours each day when he was young. When I talk with people about practice time, these huge numbers seem to usually be interpreted as what we all need to be doing. And how good of a player you are is related to how close you can get to a standard such as this. But just look at these two people. Playing the guitar is their career, their livelihood. And aside from that, they are two of the greatest guitarists who ever lived. Putting in 5 or 10 hours a day makes them happy, fulfilled, satisfied. So it's exactly what they should do. And having music as their livelihood, they have the time and energy to do this, not to mention a remarkably unique amount of love and determination. Now let's look at someone who has a normal 40 to 60 hour a week job, who has a family, and also loves to play the guitar. For this type of person to look at a 5 or 10 hour a day practice schedule as something they should aspire to do is probably impossible, but overall just not helpful. Instead, an hour a day, 30 minutes a day, even 30 minutes a few times a week, might be something this person can accomplish and feel good about. Sure, they may accomplish less overall than someone who practices a lot more, but they will accomplish more when focusing on the time they actually have, instead of trying to catch up to a schedule that just isn't feasible. There is no reason why someone who loves the guitar should feel inadequate because of their practice schedule, regardless of how much time they can or can't put in. Focusing on what's right for you, rather than on what's right for someone else, allows you to figure out who you are as a musician and what your strengths are. And what's more fulfilling, being able to meet a perceived standard of someone else, or being comfortable living with a standard that suits you best? If you believe that art is more than just good or bad, better or worse, then although you may never sound like your favorite guitar player, technically they won't ever sound like you either. Nobody else can sound like you. But everyone can be equally fulfilled with the way they play their instrument by finding the healthiest practice schedule and set of expectations that work for them, whether you practice a little or a lot. This philosophy isn't about not pushing yourself. It's about finding out what it means to push yourself and accomplish goals. Only a tiny percentage of guitarists are famous players, but the rest of us can get just as much fulfillment out of playing the guitar by figuring out how it fits into our lives and what we bring to the table. So practice the guitar the amount that makes you the most happy. Now, I have a few more things to say about practice, such as pitfalls of the more is better approach, the most I've ever practiced in one day, crazy practice stories, as well as offering a few different practice outlines to help you figure out what works best for you. But I'm going to save that for the A Guitar community. Come join and you'll gain access to not only this video lesson about practice, but, well, more instructional videos about guitar than you'll know what to do with. There are videos on how to begin, various aspects of technique, how I record my audio and video. Plus, it's a fantastic forum for us to discuss these subjects further. But what do you think about practice? Do you have any crazy practice stories that you've either experienced yourself or heard from someone else? What's the most you've ever practiced in one day? What does your healthiest practice schedule look like? Let us know down in the comments, and thank you very much for listening.
We're talking about practice, man. I mean, how silly is that, man? We're talking about practice. But we talking about practice, man. What are we talking about? Practice? We're talking about practice, man. We're talking about practice. We're talking about practice. We're talking about practice, man. But we talking about practice right now.
But it's an issue that you're
we talking about practice. Man, look, I hear you. It's funny to me too. I mean, it's strange to me too. But we talking about practice, man. We talking about practice. How the hell can I make my teammates better by practicing?